When I was 12, I shot my first deer. I shot it as a trespasser on the private property of one of the rich English ranchers, an English remittance man, one of those ne'er-do-wells from a titled British family who was shipped to far-off America where he could no longer embarrass his noble parents. In return, he received a yearly remittance from England, by which his alleged noble blood was nourished while he chiefly sat on his noble Pratt in deepest Wyoming. These early remittance men had bought up the choicest land in Sheridan County. They built ranches and stocked them with fancy horses. They had taken the beautiful stream bottoms at the foot of the Bighorns and erected their mansions there. The rustic locals were kept away by fences and signs. No hunting, fishing, or trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Only their own noble class was welcome. I once asked my grandfather Spence about our own ancestry. "Do we have any blue blood in us, Grandpa?" "No, my boy," my grandfather replied. "The Spences have only got good red blood in their veins. Spence means pantry. Comes from the word dispenser. We were the king's pantry keepers. The only thing we've ever inherited from the king was a good appetite." He laughed his soft, merry laugh, and then he added, "But I'll say one thing about the Spences. There hasn't been a felon or a drunk among the lot of us." Shooting a deer on the private lands of the king's noblemen was like playing Robin Hood, I thought. Like Robin Hood, we had a score to settle with the king's noblemen, and my father was bent on settling it. Our favorite fishing spot was Little Goose Canyon, where a clear mountain stream filled with small rainbow and a few browns came roaring out of the Bighorns. When I was a small child, we often picnicked on Sundays in Little Goose Canyon. But one Sunday, when we arrived at the mouth of the canyon, we were confronted with a new barbed wire fence that had been stretched across the road by the said king's noblemen. Others had turned back, but not my father. "Why, that son of a buck," my father exclaimed. "Does he think he owns the world? This is a county road." "What are you going to do, Daddy?" My father didn't answer for a moment. Then he said, "Get out of the car." We got out of the car and watched, half in awe, half in fear, as my father backed up the old Ford about 100 feet and revved up the motor. Then he let out the clutch. I can see the old car bouncing down the road at its top speed in second gear. I can hear the high, sweet sound of its motor, see the dust flying. My father bent over the steering wheel, his jaw set, his eyes ablaze. He hit the center fence post and down it went, and then the wires snapped one at a time and went flying in every direction. He brought the car to a stop. "Get in," my father hollered. "What are we going to do now, Daddy?" I asked. "We're going fishing," he said. My father's sense of justice and the code of ethics by which he was guided were not always in sync with the law. That certain acts were lawful and unlawful did not necessarily make them right or wrong. Right was right and wrong was wrong, and my father didn't need lawyers or lawmakers to advise him which was which. Often I have used the Robin Hood metaphor to describe to a jury my intentions in a trial. To the same extent that the deer on the land of the king's noblemen at Sheridan belonged not to him but to the state, and hence to all of us, so too justice is not a commodity that should be available only to the rich, who are born with the power of wealth and position, and are therefore permitted to fence in justice to the exclusion of all others. The safeguards of the Constitution are legal fences intended to preserve justice for all. Many years later, and after much self-examination and much sport-killing in the courtroom, I would come to a simple realization. Killing in the courtroom is like killing in the mountains, and like all killing, carries with it the same ethical standards I saw my father live by when I was a child. One does not kill in the courtroom for the sheer sport of killing. One does not kill the opponent simply because one can. Only mad dogs, a few rogue wolves, and trophy hunters with piddling self-esteem kill for pleasure. The process known as the trial must not be a mere exercise in killing. Instead, it should better be the means by which justice is nourished and by which the rights of ordinary people are fed. When I walk into a courtroom, I am the hunter. When I step into the arena, I feel as if I step into eons of history, of bloody duels, of misery and killing and fear. The king's champion has always been pitted against the poor. The trial by duel, the adversary system we call it. It is a fair fight, is it not? The king has a champion as does the poor man. Indeed, there could be no duel in the courtroom, no killing of the poor, unless the poor were defended. So we understand at last that providing the poor with a champion to fight for him, may be more to ensure that the duel can occur in the first place than to provide the poor a chance at justice. And the judge who enforces the rules of the fight, is he not always the king's man? It is then in the courtroom that I hunt and I kill. And for the killing to be right, it must be done cleanly, without unnecessary wounding, done with respect, done without waste, done without pleasure. And if the killing is done right and for the right reasons, the killing too is right. By my 12th year, the chemical testosterone had already started its fiendish work. It first attacks the unsuspecting childish brain, the boyish body still unaware of the devilment the chemical will render. In its early stages, the cynics call the disease puppy love. If it is puppy love, I say it is as deep and painful and splendid as the full-blown kind. It is puppyish only because it is innocent. In my freshman year at Sheridan High, I fell in love with Virginia. We went to dances at the canteen, where we played the jukebox and jitterbugged and danced close to songs like Miss the Saturday Dance and Deep Purple. Always, and it had to be you. During the summer of 1943, my father took a job in Laramie with a sponge iron plant as part of a government experiment to determine if iron, so necessary for the war effort, could be economically extracted from the low-grade iron ores in that area. As a result of his new job, we moved back to Laramie. I would be a sophomore. That summer, the war was raging, and most of the qualified men had been drafted. I advertised for summer work in the Laramie Boomerang and got a job right off at a ranch near Medicine Bow. So on the first day of summer vacation, my father loaded me into the family's '37 Ford, along with a bedroll and a single change of clothes, and hauled me off across 80 miles of sagebrush and dirt roads and desolate horizons to the Lemke-Hermberg Ranch. The ranch was a large sheep operation covering thousands of acres which spread across miles of distant forsaken prairies. At 13, I found myself alone, all alone in the back country of Wyoming in charge of 1,000 bestial, empty-bellied, bleating, wild-eyed sheep. I slept in the traditional sheepherder's wagon, a horse-drawn affair with a round canvas roof held up by staves like the covered wagons of old. The wagon was furnished with a wood-burning stove and a fold-down kitchen table. Behind the table lay a bunk with a worn cotton mattress and a gasoline lantern hung overhead from a hook affixed to the roof. I bounded from bed in the early morning in my long underwear, the temperature near freezing, bent on my duty to hold the herd together. And no sooner had I herded 1,000 in one direction than they were off in a cloud of dust running still in every other direction. By the time I saw old man Hermberg's pickup rattling up the road to return me to civilization a few weeks later, I was worn down to a bundle of rags and rattling bones.